Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Hey, we've got a new setup here. I'll tell you more about it in another episode, but let's go ahead and dig into this. So, this is a Gibson Flying V Custom. I've wanted to document one of these things for a long time, but a very unique opportunity just arose in order for me to get one of these things. So, let's go ahead and get it out, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the story of this one. So, sleeping in here is a 2017 second-year Gibson Flying V Custom. So, Flying V Customs, these things are relatively new. They were first introduced in the year 2016, and then after 2017, they just kind of became a standard production run. You know, sometimes off and on in production, and specs have changed from the initial run, but this video will now be a definitive guide of everything that you should know, because I didn't realize there were so many spec differences. So let's start 2016, the inaugural year. This is what it looked like. When initially offered, these were $5,999. It had these golden bell knobs on it. It had a true ABR1 bridge. The humbuckers were custom buckers, and due to the era that this was birthed in, it had a rich light fretboard. They were available in two different colors, straight up ebony and faded cherry. Now, as far as I'm aware, faded cherry only existed in 2016 outside of like a custom order. Most customs you see will be ebony. But then following that up in 2017 as a non-limited edition release, they issued them with a Nashville style bridge. I never even noticed it. We see these things get listed in the demo shop all the time, but I never realized only that first run in 2016 had the ABR1 bridge. You'll also notice things like the black speed knobs that are on this model, and they swapped our pickups out for 490R, 498T. Now, it's preference. Do you prefer custom buckers versus the 490, 498T series? But typically speaking, a pair of custom buckers is going to run you at least $400 on the used market, whereas a 490 set, you know, generally between like $150 to $200. So there is a little bit of a perceived value difference. And then from 2017, 2018 to early 2019, you could continue calling that like a Gen 2 Flying V Custom. But then in late 2019, 2020 is when Gen 3 starts, which is our current level of production. They're pretty much the exact same as far as I'm aware, but they get true ebony fretboards because the return of ebony, new Gibson ownership, stuff like that. And these are now being offered by Gibson for $5,299 brand new. So now let's take a look at this thing. Okay, so we've got golden knobs, an ABR1 bridge. Hey, Trogly, I thought you said this was a 2017. What's going on here? This is where the rest of the story needs to come into play. This one was owned by the owner of Creamtone Music. You've probably heard of him. We've talked about him before. His name is Lonnie. He drove this up to me. We worked a trade deal because I just happened to get a guitar, or actually a bass, that he was wanting, and it matches his birthday. Now, it's not birthday, birth year, but an absolute birthday matching guitar of something that he was wanting. That's what made him contact me and be like, hey, can we work some sort of a trade deal out? I've got this sweet Flying V Custom I think you might be interested in. It's like, heck yes, I am. So he drove up here. We made a trade. But the reason why this one looks like a 2016 spec one is because he completely cream toned this thing out. He did his cream tone wiring harness. He did his ABR1 conversion. He cream toned all the plastics. He even put a really cool truss rod cover on it. So this one's been modified a little bit, but it's been modified with really nice boutique parts. So it looks like this thing just needs a little bit of a cleanup, and then we can finally document a Flying V Custom. But first impressions here, it's kind of an in-between neck, maybe a little bit on the beefier side. So we'll get those measurements on the workbench. But how do you guys feel about the headstock on these things? It's interesting to have a mother-of-pearl Gibson logo on a Flying V, because generally you don't. It's normally on the truss rod cover, so to even have a custom emblem or any Gibson branding up here is a little bit strange, unless like you look at the Hendrix style Flying Vs or anything like that. So these were quite radical. And now we get the multiply binding around here. You get it on the fretboard, even the headstock. Now they don't go as far as binding the back, which would make it a true custom in my opinion, but hey, it's pretty cool. And if you like the whole Les Paul custom vibes on things that aren't Les Paul customs, it's around 2017, 2018 when Gibson did a whole lineup of these things. You get the Firebird custom, you get the Explorer custom, you get the Flying V custom, and then the regular SG and Les Paul customs, but those just look so good together. But to learn more about this particular Flying V, let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, and take an individual look at its parts and specs. Inside Lonnie's Flying V Custom, let's go ahead and check this thing out. So far everything is holding true for this being a second generation one, because we've got the 490R neck and then within our bridge the 498T. So there's a lot of guys who hate these pickups, but they're just like your standard rock style. Generally the bridge is about twice as hot as the neck, and I think they're just a good all-around rock pickup. I mean, these things have been stock in Les Paul Custom since like 1990. In various different forms, but what I really found fascinating about the Flying V Custom is how shallow these routes are. I mean, they're just deep enough to fit those humbuckers. Then you're going to notice the neck tenon doesn't stop right here. It goes all the way into the body. That's how a lot of Flying Vs are. The 70s ones always go super far too. So that's an extra long neck tenon here, but look at this. Now I'm sure a lot of you are probably quick to judge. Uh-oh, there's a crack in the guitar. What is Gibson doing? No, check out my half Les Paul video to learn more. Gibson necks, when they route the truss rod channel out, they have to cap it off with a maple block. So these lines you're seeing here are just witness seam lines of the maple. You can kind of see what I'm talking about right here if we shine a light over the tenon. The bridge pickup route is also extra shallow, like just a little under half an inch deep. Then what you're seeing here is old polishing compound that didn't get buffed out. This particular set, the neck is 7.38 k ohms within the circuit, and our bridge is 13.62. Middle position just for fun, we're at 4.79. So if that didn't scare you off, you're probably wondering, hey, what's that line? Or I was even wondering, what is that? Is that a really bad seam line showing on this thing? No, that's just where the pickguard rests against the body, so that's a non-issue as well. But speaking of our pickguard here, it is multi-ply, which means you have a white, and black layer, so 4-ply. And then they give it the beveled edge, so it exposes all of them. And you're probably wondering, why did Lonnie even bother doing this conversion? It's because the first time he saw these was in 2016, and he got this guitar as part of a trade for something else that he was wanting, or he bought it from him, I forget what he said. But as somebody who got it new, they just displayed it, and he always wanted the 2016 version. That's the one that was stuck in his head, so he did all these conversion specs to it. But as far as switch tip and knobs, those are all his own cream tone brand. As is the wiring harness right here, so he's redone everything. He put a bumblebee capacitor in here, and this is his 550 k ohm set. He said the originals were 300 k, but this really opened up the tone. As far as the route itself, that's what it looks like in there. You don't have too much room to do any modifications outside of regular pots. But here's where things get interesting. So this one started life as a Nashville style bridge, and those ones have studs within the body. So on guitars that he can modify in person, he actually pulls the studs out, and then he has a conversion right here. So basically this looks like a barrel with a stick coming out of it. The barrel portion, I think he said it's like 8 millimeters. It's a direct fit into the normal studs, so you can actually convert it back if you want to. But he just screws that into the body, and then it's essentially the exact same thing as an ABR1 because it is metal on wood contact. It's not metal into wood. So it's an interesting way to convert a Nashville style bridge into an ABR1. Now to hide it a little bit and offer some strength support to these, he does the whole double thumb wheel trick, and he screws that down straight to the top. So those little scratches and impressions you're seeing around there, it's because he was messing with that, but instead of recessing some of like the pickguard material out, he just decided to leave that side alone and just did it to this one. Now, in case you're curious, he does not sell this directly on his website. He only does that for guitars that he modifies himself, because apparently sometimes you have to deepen that route just a little bit, but he said this one was fine. And he doesn't want people messing up their guitars that aren't necessarily skilled. So normally we'd have an advanced plating incorporated Nashville style bridge, but this is his own version of the Gibson ABR1. That looks very vintage. Now Flying V Customs are extra cool because they have some 50s Flying V elements to them. So like there's a few different styles of Flying Vs. There's the 58, that's the Korina style. You can learn about them in this review and demo. And then you've got the 67 style, and then they kind of play with it in the 90s with like the V90 series, and then there's the V98. But anyways, this one uses a string through V style tailpiece, which makes it look pretty darn cool. Then perhaps my favorite feature on Flying V Customs are these diamond style output jacks. But you know, Vs are supposed to be kind of pointy guitars. It just works, everything being so jagged, despite the ends actually being rounded. But that's just your regular circular route right here. The only thing else for us to really take a look at here is our multiply binding. You can see they've got a good like 7 or so layers on there. Now this thing's not in perfect condition, so if you want to buy it from me, yeah, you've got some nicks and dings on the front. A little bit of a gouge right there, and your typical polishing swirls and scratches that black finishes have. But nothing too crazy on the top here. But now I'm curious, how thick is the body? Looks about 1.5 inches. So now, moving on from the body, we get to the neck. Richlight generally looks like crap straight out of the factory. I'll agree with you guys. But after a couple of years of it getting conditioned and being played a lot, it just starts to look pretty darn good. Like, I'm sure a lot of guys wouldn't even question that this isn't ebony, but if you know what you're looking for, you can tell there's no wood grain on this. So yeah, that's definitely a Richlight board. But what's nice is we still have our mother of pearl inlays on here. You've got 22 medium jumbo style frets with your typical 24 3/4 inch scale length. With a nut width of 1.7 inches, that increases to 2.06 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.92 and 1.04 by the 12th. Here it is at the first fret and the 12th fret. Nice and rounded neck. Now, he didn't mess with the nut or anything like that. The truss rod looks great. Again, we've got the historic style cream tone truss rod cover. These things might be pricey, but they're worth it. They look great. Then he didn't make any modifications to the tuners or anything like that either. So you've got your typical witness lines around the Gibson logo and the custom emblem, but besides a few polishing swirls, the condition is actually pretty decent. Moving on to the backside here, not too much to talk about because it's a top routed instrument, but we can see the ferrules through the body due to the string through nature. And condition wise, we got a couple of stray worming marks, nothing too crazy. And all your typical polishing swirls and whatnot. As far as the back of the neck goes, it's in pretty clean condition, but you do have a few dings that we need to talk about along the edges. Mainly one right here by the 14th fret. It's not too deep, but depending on your playing style, you might feel it. And then moving up here, our bottom E string is missing a screw. Unfortunately, I don't have a spare one to put in there, but all you really need is the tension on the top. The screw is just there to make sure that it stays centered. So functioning as is, but hey, if you ever find a spare screw, you might as well put it in. But here's our serial number for this one, CS703295, which makes this a 2017 model. And along the headstock, there's a couple other blemishes. They look like scratches or finish check, but what that is the headstock veneer / binding line actually showing. You'll see that on quite a few of these Flying V customs. Got a little bit of that over here on the treble side, and you can also see like the outline of the nut, and once again the binding line right here. That's pretty common on these. Nothing to worry about. All said and done, this one weighs about 8.5 pounds, 7 pounds, 8.7 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. All right, let's go ahead and get a tone demonstration here. There appears to be a bit of a grounding issue, so I'll leave that to the next buyer to fix, so we'll just get a best demo that we can. But I will say, I'm really digging these 550K pots. They really make a super clear sound. Sometimes your neck pickups get muddy, but this is just so clear. Now that we know all about the Gibson Flying V Custom, what are my final thoughts on this thing? This thing just feels like a normal Flying V. I was surprised just how normal it felt. Despite looking, all high-end and ultra fancy, generally a Les Paul Custom will feel completely different from a Les Paul Standard just because of all the fancy cosmetics and a few other slight differences. But this, it just feels right. It's like any other 58 style Flying V, except for these are generally actually cheaper because they're not made of Korina and all that other stuff. So one of these brand new around $5,000 versus $10,000 for the Korina big boys. I'd say each of these have their own cool attributes to them. The neck profile felt just right in my hands. It's like that kind of in between, but more so closer to a 50s style neck. I didn't notice anything too crazy about the rich light fretboard. Had I not known, I probably just would have thought it was Ebony. It looks the part and plays the part. So if nothing else, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Flying V Custom and all of its different iterations. I didn't know that they started in 2016. When I first agreed to this trade, I thought 2017 was the first year, but no. So I think for my own personal collection, I want a 2016 from that first run that has the ABR1 bridge stock from the factory. And probably go for that cherry finish too, because that definitely has become a rarity. But alright, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.